This is Western Mass News.
And we begin with new information surrounding the Chicopee firefighter accused of killing his girlfriend just over a week ago. Good Monday evening, everyone. Welcome to Western Mass News. I'm Chris Pisano.
And I'm Abby Carnevale. Western Mass News reporter Reagan Lokri joins us live in studio with more on what she's learned. Reagan?
Abby and Chris, Jason Chapdelaine is currently behind bars and on unpaid leave at the Chicopee Fire Department. We've also learned Chapdelaine has a criminal history that led to his firing, but he was rehired 2 years later. Now we've uncovered new details that show he may have broken the conditions of his appeal agreement. Western Mass News has learned just 2 years before this month's brutal killing of Eileen Monahan, the executive assistant to Hampden County Sheriff Nick Cochee, her suspected killer and boyfriend Chicopee firefighter Jason Chapdelaine, was involved in a crash in Springfield. But first, we look at his criminal record that brought him to that point. As Western Mass News reported last week, Chapdelaine served time in the early 2000s on charges including breaking and entering, assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, and drugs. According to state documents obtained by Western Mass News following his imprisonment, Chapdelaine was fired from the Chicopee Fire Department in 2004 by then Chicopee Mayor Richard Koss for conduct unbecoming of a public servant. Chapdelaine appealed his firing to the Civil Service Commission. The city of Chicopee decided unanimously to allow Chapdelaine back on the department as long as he follow a list of strict conditions, including agreement to remain absolutely alcohol and drug-free with a zero-tolerance policy, as well as undergo random alcohol and drug testing. The report goes on to say Chapdelaine further acknowledges that he will be terminated from the Chicopee Fire Department for any violation of the listed agreements. The appeal also states that the appellant has made efforts to reestablish his relationship with his father and stepmother that were the victims in their arrest for assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. Fast forward to 2022, Springfield police records show on December 12, 2022, a Toyota Tacoma crashed into a home on Merrimack Street. Police responded, pulling Chapdelaine out of the vehicle. He was then sent to the hospital, at which point we're told this incident became a medical call. Responding officers requested a criminal complaint for charges of operating under the influence of drugs. But Springfield police spokesperson Ryan Walsh tells us the district court did not find probable cause to proceed with charges. Then, just days ago, Chapdelaine, along with Monahan's body, were discovered in a Toyota Tacoma in an isolated section of Holyoke. In the police report written from the night Monahan was stabbed 40 times, responding officers wrote, Chapdelaine's eyes were watery and bloodshot. He had a strong odor of alcohol beverages coming from his body. Chapdelaine pleaded not guilty to the murder of Eileen Monahan. He is currently being held without the right to bail and has been put on unpaid leave. State Senator John Vilas weighs in on this new information.
If all that turns out to be true, and there was that many red flags, I think it's something that, I mean, you can talk about, what does the state need to do anything? But I really think that falls more on a municipal level, right? I think the hiring authority really is, the controlling agency, I would say, in this. But if it were to come out, right, that there was some protection he was afforded based on civil service or otherwise, that enabled him to maintain that job as a firefighter, obviously that's something you need to take a look at.
Western Mass News did speak with Chicopee Mayor John View, who tells us neither his office nor the Chicopee Fire or Police Department had any knowledge of any incident happening with Chapdelaine on December 12, 2022. I also reached out to the Chicopee Fire Department to find out if he received his mandatory drug testing around the time of the crash, but have not yet heard back. Reporting live in studio, Reagan Lokri for Western Mass News.